Hi, this is Congressman Tom Cole, and this is another one of our weekly congressional chats. Congress has been pretty busy this week, and as everybody tries to push toward the Christmas run, and it did one thing of enormous significance, I think, for the country and certainly for the 4th District of Oklahoma, and that's passed what's called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. This is the basic framework of how we fund the American military. I used to serve on the House Armed Services Committee, which produced this bill along with their counterparts in the Senate. And it's a really good bill. It's got a lot of big wins in it for Oklahoma. Heavy spending at Tinker Air Force Base, both for infrastructure, preparing for the new B-21 bomber that's coming in, major investments in hangars and different facilities that help maintain that. Also big wins down at Fort Sill for Lawton. Again, additional infrastructure investment there. Finally, probably the most important thing is continuing the development of what's called the E-7 wedge tail, which is the replacement for what people in Oklahoma would call AWACS, the old E-3s. They're ancient, they're out of date. We say they can't be retired without being replaced, and again, we have the money in there to continue with the new E-7. These again give you control of the air. They're the battle planes, the direct fighter planes when they're in combat. Again, this is something we should have done a long time ago. We got a couple of the new E-7s purchased. They're about $750, $800 million a piece. In last year's bill, we continue the development of them as Boeing continues to develop that aircraft. So again, it helps protect that mission. That's the point of a lot of controversy in D.C. There's a lot of folks that think we now can and should direct these aerial battles from space. Most of the fighter pilots I talk to tell me that while they think that's a long-term solution to this, we've never done it before, and they don't want to rely on that alone. They want to continue to have nearby aircraft that can make them aware of the dangers that they face in every direction. Particularly important in the Western Pacific, where obviously we're nose to nose with China, and there's all kinds of saber rattling by the Chinese over what they're going to do in the Western Pacific, specifically aimed at Taiwan. That's something that a conflict we would prefer to avoid, and we would prefer Taiwan and China work out their differences peacefully, and that Taiwan not lose its independence. And it's a reliable protege of the United States. We're under obligation to provide it with the means for self-defense. We're not obligated to defend it ourselves, but we don't want to ever get to that point that a future American president has to make that decision. I will tell you that having President Trump, who's put a lot of emphasis on this area and is beefing up our presence in the Western Pacific, has been a strong deterrent to the Chinese, but you just never know. One thing we do know is how difficult and dangerous a conflict with China would be. Remember, Taiwan is 9,000 miles from the United States and only 90 miles from China. So if we can keep a conflict like that from happening, we're in a much better position. And this bill makes some investments, again, that helps us do that. I want to, again, congratulate my friend Mike Rogers. He's the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. He's a classmate of mine, close personal friend from Alabama. He just did a stellar job. This was a bill that passed Congress in a very divided period, overwhelmingly, 312, I think, to 112, something like that. But again, very strong bipartisan support for this bill. So it shows how well Mike and his colleagues work, as they always do, across the aisle. Really, defending the country should not be a partisan issue. We should not have to rely on one party. And in this case, we didn't. It should pass the Senate next week. Again, it's been fully negotiated out between the two parties and with the administration. It's a good bill. The next problem will be is funding it. It's one thing to write an authorization bill which says we're going to do certain things, but until you actually pass the defense appropriations bill, it doesn't matter. We are marking up to the number in that bill, which again is an increase in American defense spending, and particularly focused on the Western Pacific. There's a lot of shipbuilding in this particular bill, and again, a lot of money for aerial assets that we would need in any future confrontation with China, which again we would hope to avoid. Nobody's interested in having a conflict with China, but we're also very determined to not let them bully everybody in the neighborhood. We've got a strong system of alliances in the Western Pacific, particularly with our friends, the Japanese, but also certainly with the Australians and the South Koreans, the Philippines. There are a number of countries that work very closely with the United States and honestly depend on us in cooperation with them as being the major deterrent to Chinese aggression in that part of the world. So this is a big step in the right direction. Behind the scenes, as I mentioned last week, we continue to work with the Senate. Frankly, we're a little disappointed in the Senate. We're ready to pass 5 or 6 of the remaining 9 appropriations bills. That would make the impact of any future government shutdown at the end of January, when all funding runs out again, less damaging and less likely to occur. So again, we've gotten all our work done in the House. All our bills are out of committee. We have offers as what's called the top line. That is how much you would spend on every bill in front of the Senate. They've accepted 6 of those offers, so we're ready to go on those 6 bills. And we think we can get the other 3, which are very major bills. The defense appropriations bill, the labor, health, and human services and education bill, which are our largest domestic spending bill, and energy and water bill. And of course, anything that says energy and water is pretty important in a state like Oklahoma. And we are essentially very close. Senate, as always, wants to spend more than the House. Our top line numbers are very much in line with what the administration has asked us to do. We'd restrain overall spending while slightly increasing defense spending. That's a good thing. That's the right way to go, and let the economy continue to accelerate and provide additional revenues and lower the deficit of the United States. On that score, we got some good news this week. The Federal Reserve lowered the long-term or short-term interest rates for the United States. That usually eventually affects the long-term interest rate. And a lot of what we spend is just interest on our debt. So anything that lowers the cost of credit, so to speak, actually lowers the deficit as well. President Trump's been very aggressive, very helpful in that front. He's going to be naming a new Fed chairman early next year, and I'm pretty comfortable with whoever that person is. The monetary policy of the United States, which is set by an independent board, will align a lot more closely with the administration than we've been before. That should be good for economic growth. So things are moving, they're okay. We'll, again, I think have some good progress next week, but the real deadline out there now is beyond the end of this year, January 31st. If we do not get all these appropriations bills done and negotiated out in a bipartisan way, which is what we do on the Appropriations Committee, then we could have another shutdown. I think that's the last thing anybody should want. Honestly, Democrats shut down the government for over 40 days this year. That put the payment of vital services like our air traffic controllers, our meat inspectors at risk. Our military would not have gotten paid had President Trump not aggressively found money and diverted it into the paychecks. Our American military families did not have to worry about where their next paycheck was coming. That should never, ever happen in the United States. And our workers at Tinker and Fort Sill and the Kerr Water Labs and Ada, other federal facilities, the National Weather Center, all of them have been, again, protected through January 30th, but if these bills don't get passed, they'll all be at risk in about 6 weeks, and that's something we're working very, very hard to try to avoid. Again, the Senate's been pretty slow. They didn't get all their bills out of committee. They're not in a situation to finalize negotiations at this point. And right now, they've not been willing to advance bills where we've agreed on the top lines and where we think we could actually have legislation in a matter of days to take to the floor and get passed. But we'll keep working with the Senate. It's just slow, and its rules are difficult to operate. And remember, in the Senate, they have to get to 60 votes. That's a big challenge for them, but again, we're going to work with them and try and help them get there. So with that, again, I hope you have a good week, and hope the weeks ahead are good between now and the Christmas season for you and your family. I look forward to visiting with you again next week. So So good luck, God bless, and have a great week.